catalyzing an ecstatic society. Now, what the heck do we mean by an ecstatic society? And what do we mean by catalyzing it? Well, we're going to cover all of that. And we're going to start, there's a lot of different places that we could start, but we're going to start at the deep end of the pool. Um, this is a statement from a book um, called A Story Waiting to Pierce You by Peter Kingsley. Peter Kingsley said, cultures are created and destroyed in ecstasy. And for every moment in between, there's nothing that keeps a world alive aside from the breath of ecstatics. People in general sincerely believe that they know what life and the past and the present are, although they know nothing. The news, the huge archives, the carefully written books are all about nothing. They're not even about the shadows of reality or about moving chairs on the deck of a ship that soon could go down. They are absolutely nothing. There is no such thing as true movement in this world. We can seem to run and push and dance and fly, make our way into space. But the only movement that really exists is the restlessness of our busy minds. The whole existence is an elaborate illusion to make everyone believe that something can be done here, even though nothing is ever done. In spite of the personal dreams, the collective degrees, and the associations, nothing whatsoever is altered because the real something all happened somewhere else. At any given point in time, there will be only one single straight way to put a real step forward, which is in a state of ecstasy that takes us out of ourselves. This is how it always has been and will be for us. And this is how it is for the whole. We have the strange idea in the West that civilizations just happen, that they come into existence in a hit or miss affair. And then we bumble along creating and inventing and making it better. But this is not how things are done at all. Civilizations never just happen. They're brought into existence quite consciously with unbelievable will and passion and determination from another world. Then the job of people experienced in ecstasy is to prepare the soil for them, carefully sow and plant them, and watch them grow. Now, when I read that, when I read that in the book, it had a major effect on me. First was I got pissed off, and especially about the part where he's saying all the books. I'm looking over at my books. All the books in the libraries. That doesn't mean anything. You have done nothing. And then I recognized the truth of it. And then I said, maybe I ought to go find out where this civilization thing comes from. And that's when I started going on this quest that followed a path that was laid out in his book. So, so people ask me, how do I keep going? And we know how people are fed in this society. We know that we get fed by money, so people put buckets of money in front of me. We know that people are fed by fame and power and glory. So that's why I'm constantly in the news, and I've got these elected offices, and people there's an outside chance they may elect me to be the new pope. Um, it's a really outside chance. But you never know. And so so money doesn't motivate me. Fame doesn't motivate me. Um, Even having contrarian energy as our president is motivated by people not liking him. That doesn't motivate me, or liking or not liking doesn't. And so, what is this thing that we call ecstasy, and what is the idea behind it, or what do we get from that? So, I want to share a couple of different ways of looking at the world with you. Um, One of the things we don't think about is how do we see and think about the world? Um, what is We have this really, really bad habit, and the bad habit is that we think we're normal, okay, and that everybody does things this way. I'm going to share with you some interesting viewpoints, some paradigms and perceptions that we may not have. Um, the first one is Columbus's three ships and what happened when he arrived in what we actually still call the New World, and that when he talked to the Carib people, the native people who were here, who were in the Caribbean, he they said, "Yeah, where did you come from?" And he said, "Those ships out there." And they said, "What ships?" We don't see anything. We see some clouds and there's some like little something brown floating on the water, but we don't, where'd you come from? They couldn't see the ships because they've never saw a ship that big. To them, these guys just kind of show up on the shore. And it wasn't because they were stupid. It wasn't because they were ignorant. It was simply because they were looking at something that was not part of their reality. Um, some anthropologists were in Central Africa, and they took some of the people that they were working with, that were living in the rainforest, and took them to this broad savanna where they could look out a distance. And um, the anthropologists asked them, "What's your word for those creatures out there? We call them elephants." And they gave them the word that meant beetles. Now, from the rainforest people who had never seen a distance more than 20 feet, that's how dense the rainforest was. They were looking at a wall about 20 feet away from them, and they saw these little, you know, beings, and like beetles, which is what an elephant looks like from about 10, 15 miles away. I had a similar experience. I don't know how many of you have been to the Grand Canyon. Um, when you get to the Grand Canyon and you're looking out, especially from the South Rim, and you go, "Wow, that's so big!" And then your mind does something. As you're looking out at it, your mind converts it into a wall. And so I was it's beautiful colors, and I'm sitting on the rim, and this is really cool. And then an airplane flies through the canyon, and it gave perspective to what I was looking at. And I went, "Wow!" And I said, "Wait a minute, I said that part already." But I had shrunk it in my mind to something that was manageable, something I could comprehend. So, oops. um, when my youngest daughter came to visit me in Portland, she was 7 years old or so. And I took her out to the gorge, to my favorite hiking spot at Littoral Falls. And we're walking up the path. And as we're walking up the path, she says, "There's a beer can." I said, "Yeah, it's a beer can." And we walked a little further, and she said, "There's a tissue." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." Um, and then we walked a little further, and she says, "Oh, there's a gum wrapper." And I realized she could not see the trees. 7 years old, she's got, functioning eyes, but she had no experience with the trees. So I took her off the path a little bit, and I said, "Okay, this is a tree. Now I want you to put your hand on it." Rough bark. I said, "Now look up and look at it." He says, "Oh, it's really tall." I said, "Yeah." So I walked a little further. I said, "Okay, here's another tree." And I said, "Put your hand on it and look up." And we walked a little further, and I said, "Okay, and there's another tree. And then there's another tree. And then there's another tree." And her jaw dropped. And she does this 360, and she says, "Look at all of these trees." Now, at that point, she could see them, and we could go back and walk on the path. And she wasn't stupid. She wasn't ignorant. She wasn't addled. She just simply had no experience of seeing that many trees. And so each one of us is walking through the green room. Each one of us is seeing something through a lens that may or may not work for us or not have the correct view on that lens. So our one of the things that Commonway does is shift the perception of what we would even think of as an ordinary reality, shift our perspective on how we see the world. So you know that there have been these big demonstrations in major cities around opposing the Trump administration's activities. And you also know, I hope you know, that Commonway has a different view on that. And if you don't know it, you're going to know it within the next half an hour to 40 minutes or so. And the viewpoint that Commonway is holding is one that will lead to a particular kind of society. And the kind of society that we've got is a world that works for all living beings. Now, I've been noticing in the 25 years that I'm looking over now to see how well I've got a stack of books over here, and I should be able to go and pull my book out, and I can, and it's like, ta-da. So, Creating a World That Works for All, I wrote this about 27 years ago, 26, and that idea, that meme has been moving forward ever since that time. And it's become something that people say. Um, and I'm very happy about that because that's the first step in actually using it. And so, um, but most people have been using that as a replacement for, I want to make the world a better place. It sounds cooler. I'm creating a world that works for all. But they haven't really thought what that means out, and I'm helping people do that thinking process. Um, I was invited to speak at a workshop that was entitled "Creating a World That Works for All," and I couldn't do it, so my publisher got someone else to sub for me. And they wrote to me afterwards and said, I was just thinking that creating a world that works for all means um, uh, make the world a better place, do good things, fuzzy, non-specific, etc. And she said, as she was walking up on the stage, they had these big banners that said creating a world that works for all. And she said, I looked at the banner and she said, I stopped. She says, that's not what it means. It doesn't mean I want the world to be a better place. It means something really specific. And I'm on the phone with her, like, yeah, I'm glad you got that. And I'm glad you got it right before you came up on stage and started going about something else. And so, so we are creating a world that works for all means that we create a very specific kind of world, a world that is not just let's erase all of our problems and live in whatever that world looks like. That's not it. That what we're looking at is living in a world that has the quality of ecstasy to it. So let's look at what we mean by that. Why is an ecstatic society a good idea? How in the world do we create a world that works for all living beings? And maybe, just maybe, we need to uh, answer the question of what is ecstasy. Um, and the dictionary definitions: an overwhelming feeling of great happiness or joyful excitement, an emotional or religious frenzy, or a trance-like state, originally involving an experience of mystic self-transcendence. Pretty heavy duty. Um, the term ecstasy is something that's been taken over by either fringe religious groups or drug groups about having experiences that are just so um, extra normal, beyond normal, that um, ecstasy has, well, number one, it has become the name of a particular drug, and it's just the whole notion of the drug state. Uh, but what do I mean when I'm talking about, whoops, um, when I'm talking about, oops, back up, and of course, for some reason, it's jumping around. Mhm. Yeah, what is ordinary ecstasy? This is the new book that I'm writing. I've, I actually this is the first time I've actually admitted to myself I'm going to write this book. Okay, so this is a big thing. Um, so the Society of Ordinary Ecstasy is the ecstasy of every day. I think that, at least I hope that all of you have had an experience of ecstasy, the ecstasy of the ordinary, the ecstasy of not shouting from the rooftops or, foaming at the mouth and running through the streets naked, or unless that's your thing, and in which case I will show up with a camera. Um, the and I'll give you some examples of what I mean by ordinary ecstasy. Um, the one of my favorite examples is, and you may have heard me talk about being in Chicago on a rainy, cold night, walking down the street, passing a pizza parlor, and there was a guy in the window throwing pizzas. And I stopped to watch, and there were like 20 or 30 other people on the street who had stopped in the rain to watch this guy throw pizzas. And so I was split at that moment. Number one, I didn't want to be out in a cold Chicago rain. I had a hotel room waiting for me somewhere. And on the other hand, it's like, wow, I couldn't, there was nothing that this guy was doing that I had not seen done before, that I've seen people throw pizzas before. But the look on his face, and every time he threw the dough in the air and caught it, and then he'd throw it again and he caught it. Every time he did that, every movement, he, as an ego, was not there. He was not in this movement. He and the dough and the counter and the window, it was all one. What we were looking at was a state of oneness. And that was powerful enough to stop me in my tracks on my way to a warmer, drier location. And if you had asked any of us, any of the 20 or 30 people outside this window in the rain, why are you standing in the rain? Do you want the pizza? No, because if you want the pizza, you walk inside. Um, is there something super ordinary? Um, was he throwing the pizza dough so hard it would stick to the ceiling, like, I'm Superman with pizza? Um, there was, you could not separate out the experience, but we knew the experience was significant. And I've had a number of ecstatic moments in my life that was ordinary. Um, some of them were so unconscious, I didn't realize it until after the fact that there was something transcendent in the moment. There's something transcendent in the grasping of this, not even grasp, it's like being one with it. I was in college, and I had to get on campus, and I had my car, and I was running just about on time. I didn't want to walk in late. And right before I got in my car's parked in this alley in New England. there was a puddle, a water puddle, and somebody's leaking car, maybe mine, um, had leaked oil on the water, and it had separated out into a rainbow. And this was just the most beautiful rainbow I'd ever seen. And I stopped and I just was looking at it. And like later, I realized looking at this rainbow was an ecstatic moment, but it was as ordinary as it possibly could get. You couldn't get much more ordinary than an oil slick in a mud puddle in an alley. That was about it, but it was beautiful. So beauty is one of the elements of this ecstatic experience. Um, Having a sense of the quality of transcendence, having a sense of the quality of um, impermanence. There's something about the pizza thrower where every aspect of it, of his action, was impermanent, and that's a very a Zen term, um, where you knew that he wasn't going to throw that pizza dough forever. You knew that it wasn't going to bake it forever. You knew that it was going to get devoured, and that was the end of it, and you kind of move on from there. And so, having these experiences, you may have heard me talk about the woman in at Brighton Bush Hot Springs, standing in an empty pool with big rubber gloves on and this big scrubbing brush, using baking soda to scrub down the algae from the rocks. Um, and that was an ecstatic experience. And she didn't have this big grin on her face. Oh my God, this is so much fun. She and I actually stopped there and I said, you look like you're having fun. And she stopped and looked at me and looked at the rocks and looked back at me and said, "This is a labor of love." And she went back to her rocks. Um, how many of us live in that world? How many of us live in that world 24/7? Not very many of us. How many of us live in the world in such a way that we can even recognize that we're in that world? Um, I try to hang out there as often as I can. I try to understand that that is not a particular condition. I try to understand that that is something that can happen at any time. I recognize that when I can get away from what the Dalai Lama calls the preoccupation with yourself, that when you get there, then that's when the doors of that perception, the way of seeing the world, the place you get to where you're saying, look at all those trees, that's the place where the ecstatic society begins. Um, you can't bottle it. You can't, make it last forever. You can't, it's a very temporary thing, but you can do it every day. I talk about, so when I was in the Himalayas, I was staying at the homestead of a woman named Tsering Dolma, and watching her every day growing her barley. Um, on the one hand, the fields that she had under cultivation would sustain her and her son through the winter. It's all they had to eat. And watching her in that field, she was having an ecstatic experience every day. Um, when we walked up, so it's like a 6 mile walk to her place. And there were road crews building a road that we passed. And her daughter was my guide, no, guide friend, and put up with the pace of my walking most of the time. Um, And but one of the women on the road crew, so this is in northern India, in Ladakh. And when you're on a road crew, you take your entire family with you. So the guy that's actually working on the road, his wife lived right there while they were blasting, etc. And his the young child was there. And the wife said to the to Stanzin, Searing Dolma's mother, ask your mother if she can make some chai for us. And when we got to the house, she passed this on to her mother, and her mother immediately starts making chai and packs a couple liter bottle of chai on her back and walks 3 kilometers that way to give her some tea. And there's a part of me like, is she charging for the tea? Like, why is she doing this? Is that is there some duty to take care of the road workers? It's like she's doing it because you asked. She asked, and this is her opportunity to practice compassion, to practice generosity, um, the kinds of things that we want to build a society from. I am going to take on the definition of holonic, and then I'm going to ask you for questions, and then we're going to go into another part of all this. Um, as you know, as some of you know, I have a degree in psychology. Um, the value of that degree is being able to say, from the point of view of having a bachelor's degree in psychology, that psychology is largely bullshit. Okay. And I can say that because I went through the years of getting the degree, so I can say that. Okay. Um, and I mean that seriously. There's a flaw in the Western view of psychology, and that flaw is that um, the standard model of psychology is that consciousness, the basis of psychology, is a function of and grows out of the neural activity within a human brain. And if you don't have a human brain, you cannot be conscious. Consciousness is not a possibility. Um, and that this consciousness is an accident of evolution. So we got conscious through the accidents of the Darwinian accidents that say um, we evolved from lower beings up through the ranks, survived mass extinctions, and now we're here and we got cell phones. So that means that we're both conscious and intelligent. And it doesn't mean either one of those things. And uh, so everything in the standard model, everything that we are aware of comes through that accident of consciousness. Um, Now, 100 years ago, those same scientists, or these are the parents of those scientists, said some of us on this call right now, actually most of us on this call right now, would not be conscious. That Black people didn't have consciousness, women didn't have consciousness, only Eric has consciousness. So so we don't know what he's doing here. Spying for the conscious people.
Sharif, thank you.
Yeah, right.
Your storytelling is beautiful and it's uplifting, and I think we are all conscious on this call, believe me.
um I'd like to think so. Okay.
Yep, yep, good, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I would really like to think so. So so and Jenna, I see your hand up. I'm going to go another step further here. um um
My question.
yeah, well, hang on for a second. Um, so actually, go ahead and ask the question because it may shape the rest of my answer here. So yeah.
I think I missed a piece, and that is this your philosophy or is where is this philosophy of consciousness coming from, and that only humans have it because they
Okay,
have a brain?
belief. Okay, so this notion of only humans, and again, 100 years ago, only some humans have consciousness, is the standard model. If you want to go to school for psychology, that's the assumption that you are under, and the notion that consciousness resides anywhere besides inside your head, or no, inside my head, inside your head, and the only way that we get to that consciousness is by talking, because there's no other way of getting it. That is the standard model. That's what you're going to, if you go to school for psychology,
Even today?
even today. Now you've got um so are you wondering why we're so screwed up now?
I've not heard this before.
Yeah. So
Um,
you now have different kinds of consciousness, but most of them are seen as offshoots of this standard model that says consciousness is born inside of human brains. So you could have integrative consciousness, integrative psychology that talks about how these isolated brains, isolated inside your skull, can talk and communicate with each other. Um, the existence of, for example, mirror neurons. Mirror neurons. So if I see you doing a task, you've got a hammer and you're hammering a nail, and you put uh, the readers on my head to read my electrical field.
EEG, right?
E.g., you,
Yeah, yeah.
I need help once in a while. The stuff in inside my skull gets stuck in every once in a while. So
the nodes.
so you hook me up to the EEG. You look at what I'm at what's firing for me, and the same neurons that are firing for you when you're nailing this are also firing for me. And they're saying, "Oh, that's just a sympathetic thing that comes from your me looking at you, and it has no, there's no real connection between us." So the opposite of that. Oh, I'm sorry. And you have people like what's his name? Jung, Carl Jung. Is it Carl? Um, who talks about collective consciousness. Um, but that's still considered fringe. It's not standard psychology. Now, so
Yeah, Ernest Holmes talked about it too.
say again.
Ernest Holmes
Okay, so now we're
talked about it
talking
too.
about this is where I live. Okay, this is what I've been studying, and it's still all considered fringe. Okay, Ernest Holmes is fringe. Okay, um, now so there are areas where we have what gets called um, collective psychology, and that starts looking at how we connect with other human beings, etc. But what I've been talking about in terms of holonic consciousness and this notion of holonic being comes from something that, and I can't remember the term is pan something or another. And this is
Around psychism, is that it? Sharif?
panpsychism. Thank you. This is going to be a great. I can just sit back and relax. I'll just turn all the
Well,
microphones on and y'all
we-
y'all figure
no,
this
no,
out.
no. But
Um,
what you're saying right now, Sharif, there have been studies done, repeated, that show the holonic nature of us. There's been remote healing studies, and the major institutions won't allow it. They won't listen to it. They don't believe in it. It's very frustrating. I agree with you because of what we're all been witness to. And I think what you're saying is that's why I'm here. So thank you.
yeah. So it's frustrating only to a particular degree, and that's only if I want the people who say that's not possible, that's not real, that's not mainstream, that we want to convert them. I don't give a crap about what they believe, because you can believe whatever you want to believe. We are going to act on and build a world that is connected. Um, Now, even among the psychists, the notion of that everything has consciousness. Everything has consciousness. That everything has a different kind or form of consciousness. But the universe or universes are made of consciousness. The consciousness is so different that I may not be able to talk to it on the one hand. On the other hand, it may be so similar, I can talk to it as much as I want to, but I've been taught to disbelieve that what I'm hearing in my head is coming from this pumpkin seed. Okay. If once I get to the point that I have consciousness, the pumpkin seed has consciousness, my famous or infamous broken pink pencil has consciousness. I'm sorry, broken pink plastic pencil has another form of consciousness. That Alpha Centauri has consciousness. Actually, Rupert Sheldrake wrote a book called "Is the Sun Conscious?" And oh, did he catch it? They just laid him out. And he built a case for, yes, the sun is alive. The sun is conscious. It's just a consciousness that's so much bigger than us. We can't, this would be like having the bacteria in the left turn of your small intestine, you talking to it and finding out what it's got to say. In fact, I suggest you do that. You'll get some interesting results. So one of the things that we do in the meditations, in the Catalyst meditations, is recognize all beings, and one of the levels of beings that we recognize are the beings inside our bodies. The 10 trillion species, not just individual cells, but 10 trillion species inside of us. Species that don't even have names, and they control our lives, control our destinies. And I think it might be good for us to get in contact with them. So individualized consciousness, Solon consciousness, the consciousness that starts and ends right here. Then we have a larger sense of collective consciousness. And that larger sense of collective consciousness includes all other living beings. Then there's another level of consciousness. And that is the consciousness of all beings, living, animate, inanimate, transitional, etc. And then there is the consciousness of everything that's in between, the stuff that's in between the stars. And there is stuff there. Just because breakers can't see it doesn't mean there's not stuff there. That we can be connected to literally all beings. And this is the stuff that's happening now with the telepathy tapes and with the Veda Austin tapes. And I'm getting ahead of myself. And I got to write a note that I just said those, and I got to fill in that space in a minute. Speaking of a minute, it's a little bit before the top of the hour, I think, and some of the trillions of beings inside this body also think this is a really good time to take a break. Okay, so we had a couple of comments that were in the chat box. Jenna is asking, is part of ecstasy the element of not being done for a transactional purpose? I think the answer is, in a healthy society, the transaction is irrelevant. When I was in the Himalayas, I got addicted to black salt, which is really amazing stuff. I'll tell you a story about that some other day. But I was trying to find something to bring back home with me. So I went to the marketplace, and I didn't want to go to a store. I was going to go shop the way that people in actually I was not in Leh. I was in Nepal. I was in Kathmandu. Sorry about that. Wrong Himalayan town. Um, so I was going out with my translator and uh, go to a merchant. Do you have any black salt? No, but the guy around the corner has some. So he closes up his shop, closes the door, walks with me around the corner along with my translator, and we um, no, do you have any black salt? And that guy said, no, I ran out, but this somebody over this way. So he closes up his store, and now there are three of us walking down the street. And the whole time they're saying, like, who are you? Where are you from? How long are you going to be here? Da, da, da. To make a 45 minutes long story short, at one point there are like 15 of us walking around looking for black salt. None of them, I was only going to buy it once, okay? And none of them had a financial interest in me getting this salt. All of them were, you know, I'm just interested in being here. And it was really a moment. Now, I'm clearly the epicenter of their attention. Um, I'm the same skin color as them, but I'm a foot taller than everybody there. Okay, I mean, it was almost like, yeah, he's really that tall, you know. And I finally found what I was looking for, and everybody's like, okay, he's got it, and I contributed to this, and you know, they all had stories to tell their children when they met the black giant, you know, and um, I well, I have stories to tell you, you know, and so this was definitely transactional, but the transaction was secondary to our connecting as beings. Okay. And I've had that connection with lots and lots and lots of human beings around the world, but I've also had that connection with lots of other beings that were not human, had fur, had, you know, I mean, that were just on a whole different level. Um, okay, I hope that answers that question. You also made a comment. Um, First time I saw the actual White House, it looked like a cake. Yeah, you see the whole thing, you see it full frame, and um, okay, this is the story that comes from perspective. Um, Little girl had gone to the airport a number of times to see off her grandparents or see other people fly away, and they'd wait until the plane flies away, and then they turn around and they go back. So she's like 5 or 6 years old, and she's going to be on a plane for the first time. Um, and uh, she's sitting in a seat, and whoever's accompanying her gave her the window seat, and she's looking and looking, and then she says to her mother, "When do we get smaller?" From her perspective, there's this huge airplane, and it goes in the air, and then it just shrinks, and it shrinks all the way down to nothing, and then you go home, and we don't know what happened to the people it shrunk, but they're gone now, and so yeah, there's all this perspective that you can that that you get, especially when you get this from children. um um okay, so let me get further down the list of slides that I've got here, and then I'm
Now,
hoping
have we defined holonic?
Hmm?
Have we defined holonic?
I thought I did, but let me try again. We've got
My notes have salon consciousness, collective consciousness, a bigger form of consciousness, but I don't have notes that.
okay, in what we're calling collective consciousness, I'm identifying a few different kinds of consciousness. So, uh, so holonic consciousness is the consciousness of all conscious beings, okay, and that we can share levels of consciousness. I can be conscious with other beings. Let me get to that in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slides here. Okay.
Okay, so
So, and if you do, and if once we get to Rupert Sheldrake, if you don't understand it, we'll ask it again and we'll come back to it. Okay.
okay. So in other words, holonic is only living beings. It doesn't include stones, what
I'm not
typically
ready
is
to
inanimate.
right. I'm not ready to say that. However, we have a big job ahead of us to become fully conscious with elephants, to become fully conscious with dolphins. We impute energy to them, and we need to stop imputing energy and start asking them questions and getting their answers. I'm calling elephants and whales and dolphins our elder brothers. They know a whole lot more than we do about how this planet ought to run, and we should be shutting up and taking notes from them. And in our arrogance, we're the ones that are trying to that say we're more intelligent than they are. And there's no sign of that.
I'm not talking about comparative levels of intelligence, but I would like to, I have a sense that weather is conscious as well.
Yeah. We in our catalyst meditations in the morning, I would invite you to join us. And I'm looking for something right now, and I'm not finding it. Shoot. But I talk about meta beings. Okay, I'm a being, you're a being, everybody here's a being. Um, but then you've got larger beings, and some of those larger beings are beings that are solo, that share a larger consciousness. So, for example, one form of meta being is are the beings that take on activities that solos can't. Schools, pods, murmurations, the way that a starling murmuration flies cannot be explained from the psychology of a bird. Okay, you need to have more processing power, and the only way they get that processing power is by sharing those thoughts. Another way that we look at meta beings is um, fire as a living being, a meta being, water as a meta being, um, uh, being able to see the earth, the entire earth, as one being. We're all part of it. And once we do that, we get to act in the world a completely different way. Now, most of the folks my age can't get that. Okay. I am, I see though that a lot of the younger people, um, 30s and younger, let's say, grew up with it. They grew up with science fiction. They grew up with seeing the world that way, and so they get it. And if I don't get to Greg, he's going to climb through this screen. So let me get to him, and then let me get the rest of these slides so that we can end sometime before midnight.
Uh, Thanks. I'm really happy that you told the story of the man throwing pizza, because I realized this must be common. When you said that, I immediately remembered that yesterday, as I was checking out at the supermarket, I was annoyed because I had again chosen the longest line. And so to soothe myself, I started noticing that the woman checking my groceries was such an artist. The way she was, sometimes people they can't scan the thing. She just knew where to scan each thing. She'd pick up everything that needed to be weighed. She knew the code, and she had, and I just realized that that's exactly what you're talking about. And the fact that it happened yesterday and you mentioned it today means it must happen all the time.
I know. I think it happens a whole lot. I think that it can happen more and more. I think that we could, like, for example, run a business where instead of telling people what to do, instead of punishing them when they don't do it the way I want them to do it, which means that they don't do it the right way, which means the way I want them to do it. if we recognize that all of us are sharing in something and everybody brings something to the party, we get to really have a party. Um, and so much of the breaker control manipulation behavior isn't even around making money. It's just around, I want to be in control. I want to tell you what to do. Um, and what happens when people set their own workplace rules? When do you go to work? What time does work start? What time does work stop, etc.? If you let all that go, then you may be able to see the world operating in a completely different way. Okay, I am taking no further questions for right now. I'm going to is I'm going to say something that I hope is not a surprise to any of us. Um, this society is dying. It will transform and come back bigger and better, not necessarily bigger, but better and more suitable to life than it is right now. The process by which that is happening is fairly, people are many people are down, depressed, etc., because they believe that the society that we have will go on forever. And since it looks like it's not going to go on forever, they're upset about that. If a woman is having a baby and going through all the stuff about having the baby, but doesn't recognize she's having a baby, she can get really, really seriously bent out of shape. It feels like you're dying, and you're not. We are not. The society may be, but we are not. So let's look at some of the ways that this society is, from the point of view of breaker society, what's going to happen? How do we die? Okay. This is going to be really quick. So the externals, the things that we have no control over that may happen, is solar flares or coronal mass ejections. One solar flare, one solar mass ejection, and we are back in the 16th century, maybe even before. It's like pop. Name something that's not controlled by electricity, and the entire electrical grid can be taken out by one solar flare or one coronal mass ejection. People freak out not having electricity for one day. Imagine not having electricity for 1 to 2 years. I don't think there's going to be that many people left to freak out. Oops. Our externals can be geocentric, earthquakes, volcanoes, that kind of stuff. Climate change, which is so slow, people are basically don't care about it until until it reaches around and bites them in the butt. Magnetic pole shift, which is going to be a lot more subtle. I don't know what the effects of that are going to be, but I think that we're on the cusp of it. Then we get to the internals, the things that we do have control over, and we're not going to control them. The collapse of money, the collapse of governance. Now we're watching the collapse of money and watching the collapse of governance right now, happening real time, and we keep saying, "Oh, that's them. Oh, that's them. Oh, that's them." And then when it becomes us, what are we going to do? I find it interesting how we don't look at what's going on in Haiti. There are other societies that have also fallen off the level of civilization has fallen below a minimum, and that's what we will be looking at for our future at some point in time. Wars that can happen in a heartbeat, and we don't ever have to fight another war, but it doesn't mean we won't. Oh, and then there's some wild cards. Alien contact. Every movie you've ever seen where there's contact with aliens that are proven, people go berserk. And I don't know why. It's like, oh, you got new friends. But people will go berserk. Jesus returns and is amazingly pissed off. We have to deal with the fact that what we've been calling Christianity is like the opposite of what Jesus has taught 2,000 some odd years ago. You know that I've been talking about using the metaphor of caterpillar to butterfly in terms of profound metamorphosis. That we get the caterpillar is eating everything possible in your garden. There's nothing that stops it, except that it stops. And it stops because it answers a higher calling. It attaches its butt to to a twig. It peels off its own skin, which has got to hurt, and forms a chrysalis. Inside the chrysalis, it turns into goo. And then from that goo, the imaginal cells inside the chrysalis envision the butterfly and turns all of these former caterpillar cells into present butterfly cells. Now, we know this is the process. We are not thinking about what that means in terms of the society that we're in right now. Inside the chrysalis, if you're going to get a living butterfly out of it, every single cell of the caterpillar has to go into a superpositional state. And I mean that in terms of quantum reality. The superpositional state of the goo is that it is not a caterpillar. It is also not a butterfly. I'm not sure it even qualifies as living. So just like Schrodinger's cat inside the box, that you can't say whether the cat is alive or dead, that this goo inside the chrysalis, you can't say whether it's alive or dead. You also can't say that it is a caterpillar or a butterfly. It's neither. And so this superpositional state, I'm calling it Schrodinger's chrysalis, is a quantum state, and that quantum state turns into a butterfly, or it all dies. There is no path that you get back to a caterpillar. Now, something has to turn that turn the caterpillar into goo. I'm proposing that there's a pathogen inside the chrysalis that is turning the former caterpillar into goo. Now, I call that the transformational, universal, metamorphic pathogen. It has a job, and that job is to transform the institutions of the caterpillar into goo, because those who are the imaginal cells inside the chrysalis don't know what to do with a caterpillar. You do know what to do with goo. Now, this is funny, but it's only semi-funny. I had someone tell me that, as you know, I'm not anti-Trump. I don't oppose him. And I don't oppose him because it's a necessary stage to us becoming a mature society. It's a necessary step. But people, when I don't criticize him for doing, if I'm not calling him names, and I'm not, oh, what a jerk he is, and what an idiot he is, etc. If I'm not going through that, I must support him. And the answer is no, I don't support him. I don't. Okay. But I know it's a necessary step. It has to happen some kind of way, and it might as well happen with him. At some kind of way, that whole caterpillar has to be in a position where we start saying and seeing that there's something else that needs to happen. Is he pathogenic? Yep. Do we need that pathogen? Yep. Like you need a whole bunch of the pathogens that are in your body right now that help you regulate, help you become you. Yep. That's where that's at. I'm gonna go. Where am I gonna go? Okay, I'm gonna go. Keep going forwards here. So I want to talk about. I've written a whole bunch of books on inclusivity as a concept, the theory of inclusivity. How do all of us come together to look at inclusivity? And I want to talk about this philosophy of inclusivity. It's got some steps to it. And this is part of that consciousness of all, to see that all is alive, all is conscious. The consciousness of a Sharif is different from the consciousness of the pumpkin seed. Actually, my peanuts are larger. Okay, consciousness of the peanut. Now, the consciousness of the peanut is operating on a higher level consciousness than the consciousness of the broken pink pencil. That consciousness is higher than the consciousness of, the dead leaves that are from my plant over there. Okay. Now, all of that is part of the universe, and all of that is part of consciousness. All of that is connected, and connected in ways that we can't even imagine right now. Our children will form societies based on connections that we can't even see. The notion of mind is all pervasive, but as long as I think that mind means what I'm thinking about, you don't get to understand how pervasive mind is. I have to come to grips with society, with a living society, where some of the beings in this society have no idea that the sun exists. Beings that are in the deep trenches in the oceans, they have no idea that there's a big ball of fire out there somewhere doing such and such. Just like it's irrelevant to them. And just like there's things that are irrelevant to them that are obvious to the rest of the beings, things that are invisible to me that are visible to other beings. Consciousness is universal throughout all of the universes, not just humans. And the laws of physics bend toward consciousness. The laws of physics aren't fixed. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that, I think, right now. And I thought this was going to be a hidden slide, but since it's up there, I guess I'm supposed to talk about it. Arthur Koestler wrote a whole bunch of books, and this book is like from the 50s, I think, where he talks about the concept of coincidence and the consciousness of what we call random behavior. I got a coin, and there should be a coin somewhere on this desk, but it's lost to me now. Get the coin, flip it, and it either lands heads or tails. Flip it again, it'll land heads or tails. Flip it again, and after a while, you see a pattern emerge where half the time it's heads and half the time it's tails. So let's say I have nothing else to do with my time, so I flip this coin 10,000 times. Roughly 5,000 of them will be heads and 5,000 will be tails. What Koestler did was he created a random number generator. And he just wanted to look at how many times the random number generator generated an even number, generated an odd number. Ran it through 10,000 cycles. Roughly half the time it was even, half the time it was odd. So let's say, when I mean roughly, I mean like there were 5,010 heads and 4,990 tails. Okay. He then took that random number generator and hooked it up to a heat lamp. If it generated an even number, the lamp would come on. If it generated an odd number, the lamp would go off. Run it through 10,000 cycles. The lamp would be on half the time and would go off half the time. Okay, so everybody's with me. You then take a tray of baby chicks and put it in front of the heat lamp and run the random number generator through another 10,000 cycles. The lamp stays on way past the time of what you would predict by chance, which means baby chicks are a lot smarter than you give them credit for, because they know how to affect the numbers that are coming out of a random number generator to make it generate more even numbers to keep the lamp on. Or there's something else going on. So Kessler said, okay, there's something else going on. Maybe I'm keeping the lamp on. Maybe I want the cute little fuzzy baby chickens to be warm, and I'm doing it. So he created a double-blind experiment. He had two sets of eggs. He had a dozen eggs that were fertile and ready to hatch, and another dozen eggs that are hard-boiled, which makes them really hard to hatch, and ran this again. And he had a researcher that was not him put tray A or tray B in front of the heat lamp. So put nothing in front of the heat lamp. The heat lamp is at 50-50. He put the boiled eggs in front of the heat lamp. It stays at 50-50. He put the fertile eggs in front of the heat lamp, and the heat lamp stays on, which means that fertile eggs are a lot smarter than you give them credit for. Or it means there's something else going on. Let's explore something else a little further. These are two books that Rupert Sheldrake wrote, The Sense of Being Stared At and Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home. Sense of being stared at. How many of you have had the feeling in a public situation that somebody's staring at you? Yes? No? Okay. How many times have you looked around to see if somebody is staring at you and you see somebody's eyes darting away from you? Like somebody was staring at you? Yes? So he tested it, and he creates these elaborate tests, and I'm not going to talk about that test. I'm going to talk about the ones, the dogs that know when their owners are coming home. How many of you have had dogs? And how many of you have the dog knows when you're coming home? And breakers say, oh, the dog can't know when you're coming home, but the dog is habituated to the time that you usually come in at 6 o'clock. So 5:45, the dog can sense time, and the dog wanders to your door. So he tested this by having people who were had flexible schedules. You can go home whenever you want to. And they would set up a camera in the house where the dog normally hangs out. And they then had a camera at the door to see when the dog starts waiting for you. And he would have his experimenters call the person up and say, right now, we want you to intend to go home and go home. Regardless of what time you usually go home, as soon as you have that intention, 10 miles away in your house, the dog gets up off the sofa and goes to the front door. Another theory is that the dog knows the sound of your car, and when he hears the car, he goes to the front door. So Sheldrake would call the people up that could go home whenever they want to, and he said, we want you to drive around the city according to our directions, but we don't want you to go home. And so get in your car, turn right here, turn left there. So the person's following the instructions, and the instructions lead them right past their own house. And so the car is on the street, but you don't have an intention to go home. So the car just keeps going and the dog stays where it is. So you drive 2 miles away, and then he says, okay, now we want you to intend to go home, and we want you to go home. And the dog then gets up off the sofa and goes to the front door. They tried to do the same experiment with cats, but cats don't care whether you're coming home or not, unless they just need you to open a can for them. So they changed the experiment. they said if cat owners regularly say when it's time to go to the vet, they can't find the cat. Cat's gone. So Sheldrake asked 50 vets in London, do cat owners miss their appointments at a higher level than any other animal owner? And 49 of the 50 vets said they're always missing their appointments. Can't find the cat. People will say that they actually make the appointment for the cat from their office to make sure the cat doesn't overhear them setting up a vet's appointment. And so 49 of the 50 did that. And the 50th one said, we don't take appointments for cats. He said, they just tell people, if you can find your cat, just bring it in, you know. So, so these are universal situations. These point to a common way of looking at the world. These point to the fact that I, whatever that means, this body here, can have consciousness experiences that are shared with other beings, with other human beings. So how many times have you started thinking about someone and then they call? And that's because they knew you were thinking about them. Okay. This is also true with other beings that are not human beings. Let me get to the red balloon on a randomizer experiment. In this experiment, you know that chicks of most beings bond with the first thing that they see. And in this situation, when the chicks were hatching, they were moving a red balloon in front of the chicks, so they bonded with the red balloon. You take the red balloon and you put it on a randomizer. So it generates two random signals. One is to turn it on its axis by somewhere between 1 and 360 degrees. So it turns. And then you tell it to move forward by some distance, like say from 1 inch to 6 inches. So you go forward. And then it turns in another direction and it goes in another direction. The pattern that this thing makes in the room is completely random. And so the balloon moves over here and all the chicks right around it, they'll move with mama balloon. And then it moves over here and it just follows this balloon all around the area. They then take the chicks, lock them up in a cage, but have in full sight of the balloon. So they can see the balloon and the balloon can see them. And then they run it again. And so this is a random number that spins the balloon some degrees and another random number that gets it to move forward, move in that direction. And the pattern you get in both of those instances is pretty darn amazing. So this is the first pattern where there's no chicks in a cage and the chicks are out with the balloon. And it starts right here. And this is about as random as you get. Okay. I mean, they're all over the place. Then you take all the chicks out of the room and you put them in this cage. Glass walls so that the chicks can see mama balloon. So the second pattern looks like this. So that all the chicks are over here. And this balloon is trying to get to its chicks. And tell me how that works. It has to affect the randomizer, two randomizers. So the balloon starts in the middle of the room and it starts to move away from the chicks, and just about every other movement moves it closer to its chicks. The chicks are calling the balloon. How does that work? I don't know. Nobody knows. We just know that that's what's happening. And that opens amazing opportunities for us to think about, how do things like this take place? What is it that takes place? Okay, I'm almost out of time right now. Um, I want to go through this in close to no time at all. And that is to talk about, I went to the Himalayas, wound up in a cave at the 15,000-foot level, not a whole lot of oxygen up there, and fasting in this abandoned temple. And I wound up having actually a series of revelations. I just want to talk about one of them today that ties into everything else we've been talking about. So let me share that with you. This is me on the path. I'm starting out on the path. It took a while to walk about 6 miles. I'll say no more right now. That I thought I was in good shape. I tried doing that with no oxygen. And this is the path. The path got, okay, let's go back one. You see how wide the path is now. You could probably get a car down that. This path is 1 foot in front of the other. Had a really interesting experience with that. I'll tell you some other day. And we wound up at what I named the Temple of Tara. This was an abandoned monastery that was so old we couldn't tell what religion it was from. It may have been Buddhist, but it may have been Bon, which predated Buddhism in this area. You see these prayer flags that I put up. And that's from the inside, looking down at the Doak River there. And I got a download, and the download said that human beings have powers that we in the West, we as breakers cannot exercise. We can exercise them but we can't do that while we're thinking like we are individuals. We can only do it collectively, holonically, when we become one in our being. Not just as an idea, like, oh yes, we're all one. I'm one with the birds, I'm one with the bees, but to actually live that way. So we've got the thing that we've got is what I've come to call 5 latent powers. I'm going to walk through all 5 of them really quickly, too quickly, and then I'm going to stop. So what are the 5 latent powers? Collective telepathy and knowing is number 1. Spatial powers, number 2. Temporal powers, number 3. Communication powers, number 4. And the 5th one is what I call bodily powers. Let's go through each one of them really quickly. The collective telepathy and knowing. This means that you can know everything. You can have, it's beyond encyclopedic. You can just have a knowing of everything. Its knowing is not restricted by distance. It's not restricted by time. It's not restricted by anything. The ancient Holons, what we call the keepers, the people that you may call indigenous people, didn't live in fear or scarcity. They knew how to talk to the life field, and the life field provided for them. And the more they were in reverence to the field, the better the field took care of them. For those of you who know, or I should say know of, you haven't gotten around to the telepathy tapes yet. I may be talking to someone here, I'm not sure. But the telepathy tapes are saying that the people that we call autistic people have abilities that are way beyond what our abilities are here. we treat them as though they were defective when what they are is way beyond our capacity to even understand. Many of them are fully telepathic with each other. Many of them are accessing that knowing capacity. Many of them think in multiple languages. Many of them think in higher mathematics. I mean, they think in calculus, they think in geometry, etc. And instead of us trying to make them normal and act like us, we should be trying to figure out how they leveraged into this collective telepathy. They're saying to their caregivers that when they go into this place that they call being on the hill, that when they go there, they can, they said they can walk into this room, this virtual room, and when they need to know something, there'll be a hat on the wall, and say the hat is um, quantum mechanics. Just put the hat on, pick the hat up, put it on, and then they know quantum mechanics. Um, or if it's biology, they need to know, they'll pick up the biology hat, put it on, and then they'll just know everything they need to know about biology. Okay, at this rate, I'll be here till 9. Let me blast through the rest of this. So collective telepathy and knowing includes group telepathy, group knowing, consciousness and mental influencing, consciousness shifting, consciousness transferring, and indigenous people, keepers talk about shape shifting. They can become other animals. The other animals can become human, and there's an exchange going on. Communication via transcendence. They transcend their bodies. In terms of spatial powers, being able to catalyze actions at a distance. That means transportation, moving from one place to another at great speed or at no speed at all. Navigation, like the Polynesians, crossing vast distances while knowing one's destination. The Polynesians knew where they were going. They knew exactly how long it would take them there. They would put enough food in their canoes to last for the voyage and no more. They didn't need any more because they knew where they were going. Think about Columbus kind of sloshing around in the Atlantic until he ran into a continent. Translocation, having your consciousness in a different position than your body. Lots and lots of information about what we now call out-of-body experiences. When this is, we can move our bodies wherever we want to move our bodies to. Bilocation, being in 2 or 3 or 4 different places at one time. Object moving and manipulation, like, for example, cutting and moving the megalithic stones of the Great Pyramid and the other pyramids. Came across something just the other day, and I'll have to go back and find it. This team from Japan said they wanted to make they were going to build a scale model of the Great Pyramid. Great Pyramid is 360 feet tall. So theirs was going to be 36 feet tall. And they said to build this like tiny scale model of the Great Pyramid was going to take them a month or two. So 2 years later, when they finished it, they said, the only thing that we know now is that everything that we know about the Great Pyramid is wrong. They have no idea who built it, no idea how it was built. Every technique they used, even when they started incorporating modern techniques, it didn't speed anything up. And they said they were firmly convinced that they had no idea how it got built. And I said, hey, I started there. I don't have to do the sweating on trying to figure that out. Object sensing, knowing where objects are from a distance, locating food sources. I mean, folks knew where their food was. And weather control, just like, and I think weather control would include water control, would include lots of things. If we were talking to the fires, we could have said to the fire in Los Angeles, we'd appreciate it if you go that way. And the fire beings would go that way if they were listening to us and if we asked them respectfully. Okay, spatial power, temporal powers, we can time shift. How many of you have been in a situation where you felt time speed up? Yes. How many of you been in situations where you felt time slow down? Yep. I haven't gotten to the time stopping altogether, but I've had it slow down a whole lot. Um, um, how many of us shift into alternate narratives or stories or realities that all of a sudden things are off? All of a sudden, the things that you have experienced are different. Um, we call that shifting into a different narrative, a different story. Um, there are lots and lots of stories of time travelers, people who like inadvertently wound up in different places. And I got a whole bunch of those if you care to hear them at some point. Temporal forecasting, all of the technologies that exist in every single culture I've been able to find say that have all of them have technologies where you tell the future, technologies where you go to the oracle, technologies that can forecast, that can look into future behaviors. Communication powers include nonverbal communication with other aspects of yourself. That you can have nonverbal communication with other beings, other human beings. When you're very close to someone, you don't necessarily need to say things to them. They know what you're going to say. This is true for beings with or without your bodies. The people who talk to their ancestors frequently are doing this nonverbal communication with other human beings. Communication with transcendent beings, gods, goddesses, avatars, um, jinn, you name them. Communication with other earth beings, with other species. Communication with beings of the past, beings of the future, and beings of other worlds. If I can take my consciousness out of my body and have it travel around and then have an experience and bring it back, who's to say can't have that consciousness go to another planet or go to another star and get there a whole lot safer, a whole lot faster, and a whole lot more interestingly than Elon Musk is planning. Why do we need to take the meat sack with us? The meat sack is our connection to the earth. Once I let go of the conscious, if I disconnect consciousness and earth, I can go anywhere. Bodily powers is the least important of these powers to me. But it's also the most studied. Lots of scientists have been looking at, for example, yogis and monks able to change their heart rate at will, change their respiration at will, people healing themselves through the power of prayer. And then there's this dude. So this is Max Planck. You can't get more quantum scientist than Max Planck. And he says, all matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. It didn't say all matter on Earth. It's the matrix of all matter. Okay, boys and girls. I run through the conclusions I started with, but I think you all remember them and have it tattooed on your wrist now. So let's open the floor to what you've written, and I'm just looking at right now. Charlene, some of these are comments. Kali's cycles, I should say the Hindu cycles of construction and destruction, and where in the Kali Yugas are we at this point in time? That's all interesting stuff. Lynn McTaggart doing the research around the power of intention, but Lynn is someone who is still looking inside the meat skull as opposed to looking at this multi-dimensional place. Charlene asked
I don't think that's exactly true because she went on to do work. She's got a separate book called The Power of Eight. I don't know why she centered on eight. And she's done collective experiments with global participants, such as let's all come together, let get the group together, and collective consciousness to change the pH of a glass of water, for example. So I
Yes.
think it's beyond just.
Okay. I've been, I know her. I haven't talked with her about this stuff.
Wow.
But the people who, even the people who are in the power of 8 groups, stop short of saying there is an all-pervasive consciousness of which we are part. They're still looking at my power as um, as an individual, what I call a solon, which is the opposite of a holon. Solon is my consciousness is locked inside of the bone temple here, and holons are seeing I've got a part of this consciousness. The other part of the consciousness is in each one of you, and the other part of that consciousness is literally walking down the street of someone I've never ever seen before, but I'm using their brain cells. Okay. This is and again, I'm not saying that she doesn't see that. I'm not saying that she doesn't see it now, but last time I checked in with her, I didn't see that she was talking about universal intention, universal consciousness, and the consciousness of a dolphin to be able to affect my consciousness and my living. Okay. Okay. Jen, I'm going to put you on hold because I want to get to some of these other questions before we have people hanging up. It looks like I'm going to go until the bottom of the hour. Charlene said, would the number of chicks impact the results on um, the balloon experiment? And I would say you probably need as many chicks as would be born in a collective. Wood chicks lay 20 eggs. Eagles lay 2. But yeah, I think that having the right mass would be good, would be active. Yeah.
I was thinking of it in the respect around the lines of murmuration, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so how many starlings do you need for a murmuration? I think that's actually a finite number. If you got 12 starlings, they don't do all the swoopy stuff. The murmuration of I just happen to have it here, 10 million starlings. And I got a chat box in here somewhere. Oh, I just got rid of it. This is a documentary done in Rome. They said there are 10 million starlings roosting in Rome. 7 tons of bird poop a day. Yeah, when you're walking down the street in Rome at night, walk quickly or carry an umbrella. Huh?
How many million?
10 million starlings, 8 tons of crap. Greg, yeah, said that Angie texted me to ask the question that I was texting her to answer this afternoon. Okay, there you go. And as a musician, you said I've been aware of time shifts. I've been aware, I'm not a musician, but there's something that happens with music that you get that takes you out of yourself. I dated briefly a woman who is a very prima donna, mezzo soprano down in Argentina. And she said that there are lots of experiences where she would stop being present. She could stand to the side and say, wow, that is a really good performance that I'm doing down there. She was not in the body anymore. And when that happens, it becomes a more perfect experience. she was saying she was in La Scala in Europe and was the lead singer and did her event perfectly. I mean, she said it was just, and everybody knew this was a perfect moment. And they asked for an encore, and she started singing a cappella the encore, and she started crying. Did not miss a note, didn't even quaver on a note, and these tears are streaming down. Then she said, everybody in the place is crying, okay? And she is on the side saying, oh my God, this is so great, not missing a note. And that is an ecstatic experience. That is a holonic experience. Although only one person was active, all of them, everybody's neurons are operating on this point. Jenna asks, are you saying are parallel universes possible? I think under this these ways of seeing the world, absolutely. Is it possible for you and me and each one of us to be in multiple universes?
I forgot
Yes.
I forgot which of the special powers that posed a question. I think it had to do with the temporal,
Um,
perhaps, but it's like in a second of time, life can change dramatically, and suddenly the path you're on a different path.
mhm.
And I think that's part of what prompted that question.
Well, number one, you're on a different path, and number two, you can move to another universe, a universe where for some reason, I didn't go to law school. I went to medical school. And so there's a different Dr. Sharif on that planet. And I didn't, um, uh, everything, I could have every experience except for one experience. In my book, and it's too low for me to grab right now, in the book Chronicles of the Upheavals, there are people who are adept at moving into these parallel dimensions and parallel universes where you know you can access the infinite numbers of yourself, okay, and grow and learn and develop from this infinite way of getting to yourself. um I just got lost in my book. I wound up reading the Chronicles of the Upheavals pretty frequently. I know I wrote the book. I know what happens, but it's really entertaining, and it's also like what happens when we develop the ability to move between these dimensions. And I always ask you, all of you, if you haven't seen the movie Arrival, you need to go
Oh,
see it.
yeah. Yeah.
What happens when you're dealing with beings who know your future um, and are trying to get your attention about a future event, where the heptapod is banging on the barrier, trying to say your room's about to blow up. It's like you need to pay attention to what's happening in the room there, and they're because they see time in a linear fashion, they couldn't see it. We will develop a society. We are developing right now a society that's going to be based on all of these. We'll stop calling them the latent powers and start calling them the active powers, and stop caring about money. The society of money is just completely boring. Start caring about a society that actually makes us come alive, that actually that calls on our higher abilities. Let me get to that in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slides here. Okay.
Okay, so
So and if you do, and if once we get to Rupert Sheldrake, if you don't understand it, we'll ask it again and we'll come back to it. Okay.
so in other words, holonic is only living beings. It doesn't include stones, what
I'm not
typically
ready
is
to,
inanimate.
right. I'm not ready to say that. However, we have a big job ahead of us to become fully conscious with elephants, to become fully conscious with dolphins. We impute energy to them, and we need to stop imputing energy and start asking them questions and getting their answers. Um, I'm calling elephants and whales and dolphins our elder brothers. They know a whole lot more than we do about how this planet ought to run, and we should be shutting up and taking notes from them. And in our arrogance, we're the ones that are trying to that say we're more intelligent than they are. And there's no sign of that.
I'm not talking about comparative levels of intelligence, but I would like to, I have a sense that weather is conscious as well.
Yeah. Um, we in our catalyst meditations in the morning, I would invite you to join us. And I'm looking for something right now, and I'm not finding it. Shoot. But I talk about meta beings. Okay, I'm a being, you're a being, everybody here's a being. Um, but then you've got larger beings, and some of those larger beings are beings that are solo, that share a larger consciousness. So, for example, um, one form of meta being is are the beings that take on activities that that solos can't. Schools, pods, murmurations, the way that a starling murmuration flies cannot be explained from the psychology of a bird. Okay, you need to have more processing power, and the only way they get that processing power is by sharing those thoughts. Another way that we look at meta beings is um, fire as a living being, a meta being, water as a meta being, um, uh, being able to see the earth, the entire earth, as one being. We're all part of it. And once we do that, we get to act in the world a completely different way. Now, most of the folks my age can't get that. Okay. I am I see though that a lot of the younger people, um 30s and younger, let's say, grew up with it. They grew up with science fiction. They grew up with seeing the world that way, and so they get it. And if I don't get to Greg, he's going to climb through this screen. So let me get to him, and then let me get the rest of these slides so that we can end sometime before midnight.
Thanks. I'm really happy that you told the story of the man throwing pizza because I realized this must be common. When you said that, I immediately remembered that yesterday, as I was checking out at the supermarket, I was annoyed because I had again chosen the longest line. And so to soothe myself, I started noticing that the woman checking my groceries was such an artist. The way she was, sometimes people they can't scan the thing. She just knew where to scan each thing. She'd pick up everything that needed to be weighed. She knew the code, and she had, and I just realized that that's exactly what you're talking about. And the fact that it happened yesterday and you mentioned it today means it must happen all the time.
I know. I think it happens a whole lot. I think that it can happen more and more. I think that we could, like, for example, run a business where instead of telling people what to do, instead of punishing them when they don't do it the way I want them to do it, which means that they don't do it the right way, which means the way I want them to do it. If we recognize that all of us are sharing in something and everybody brings something to the party, we get to really have a party. Um, and so much of the breaker control manipulation behavior isn't even around making money. It's just around, I want to be in control. I want to tell you what to do. Um, and what happens when people set their own workplace rules. When do you go to work? What time does work start? What time does work stop, etc. If you let all that go, then you may be able to see the world operating in a completely different way. Okay, I am taking no further questions for right now. I'm going to is I'm going to say something that I hope is not a surprise to any of us. This society is dying. It will transform and come back bigger and better, not necessarily bigger, but better and more suitable to life than it is right now. The process by which that is happening is fairly, people are many people are down, depressed, etc., because they believe that the society that we have will go on forever. And since it looks like it's not going to go on forever, they're upset about that. If a woman is having a baby and going through all the stuff about having the baby, but doesn't recognize she's having a baby, she can get really, really seriously bent out of shape. You know, it feels like you're dying, and you're not. We are not. The society may be, but we are not. So let's look at some of the ways that this society is, from the point of view of breaker society, what's going to happen? How do we die? Okay. This will be really quick. So the externals, the things that we have no control over that may happen, is solar flares or coronal mass ejections. One solar flare, one solar mass ejection, and we are back in the 16th century, maybe even before. It's like pop. Name something that's not controlled by electricity, and the entire electrical grid can be taken out by one solar flare or one coronal mass ejection. People freak out not having electricity for one day. Imagine not having electricity for 1 to 2 years. I don't think there's going to be that many people left to freak out. Oops. Our externals can be geocentric, earthquakes, volcanoes, that kind of stuff. Climate change, which is so slow, people are basically don't care about it until until it reaches around and bites them in the butt. Magnetic pole shift, which is going to be a lot more subtle. I don't know what the effects of that are going to be, but I think that we're on the cusp of it. Then we get to the internals, the things that we do have control over, and we're not going to control them. The collapse of money, the collapse of governance. Now we're watching the collapse of money and watching the collapse of governance right now, happening real time, and we keep saying, "Oh, that's them. Oh, that's them. Oh, that's them." And then when it becomes us, what are we going to do? I find it interesting how we don't look at what's going on in Haiti. There are other societies that have also fallen off the level of civilization has fallen below a minimum, and that's what we will be looking at for our future at some point in time. Wars that can happen in a heartbeat, and we don't ever have to fight another war, but it doesn't mean we won't. Oh, and then there's some wild cards. Alien contact. Every movie you've ever seen where there's contact with aliens that are proven, people go berserk. And I don't know why. It's like, oh, you got new friends. But people will go berserk. Jesus returns and is amazingly pissed off. We have to deal with the fact that what we've been calling Christianity is like the opposite of what Jesus has taught 2,000 some odd years ago. You know that I've been talking about using the metaphor of caterpillar to butterfly in terms of profound metamorphosis. That we get the caterpillar is eating everything possible in your garden, there's nothing that stops it, except that it stops. And it stops because it answers a higher calling. It attaches its butt to to a twig. It peels off its own skin, which has got to hurt, and forms a chrysalis. Inside the chrysalis, it turns into goo. And then from that goo, the imaginal cells inside the chrysalis envision the butterfly and turns all of these former caterpillar cells into present butterfly cells. Now, we know this is the process. We are not thinking about what that means in terms of the society that we're in right now. Inside the chrysalis, if you're going to get a living butterfly out of it, every single cell of the caterpillar has to go into a superpositional state. And I mean that in terms of quantum reality. The superpositional state of the goo is that it is not a caterpillar. It is also not a butterfly. I'm not sure it even qualifies as living. So just like Schrodinger's cat inside the box, that you can't say whether the cat is alive or dead, that this goo inside the chrysalis, you can't say whether it's alive or dead. You also can't say that it is a caterpillar or a butterfly. It's neither. And so this superpositional state, I'm calling it Schrodinger's chrysalis, is a quantum state, and that quantum state turns into a butterfly, or it all dies. There is no path that you get back to a caterpillar. Now, something has to turn that turn the caterpillar into goo. I'm proposing a that there's a pathogen inside the chrysalis that is turning the chrysalis, turning the former caterpillar into goo. Now, I call that the transformational, universal, metamorphic pathogen. It has a job, and that job is to transform the institutions of the caterpillar into goo. Telepathy tapes are really, really important. I'm going to see if I can get you a link. No, I can't. I'm going to not try to. Just YouTube search for telepathy tapes and you'll come across them. Start with episode 1, go to at least 10 or 11. Bottom line, autistic people are telepathic, and are telepathic at levels that we can't even imagine. According to the parapsychology tests, if you test out at 30%, that says that you have telepathic powers that are beyond chance. The autistic people are testing out at 95% and sometimes 100%. It's just like us talking. More than that, they can see the entire room. So it's not like they're reading someone's mind. They can, so if I'm sitting here and I've got a book open, and I'm looking at the book, and I'm the only person who can look at that, is looking at the book, they can tell me what's in the book. They can just say, you're looking at you know, a balloon, or you're looking at a blimp, or you're looking at a such and such. They are all telepathic with each other, meaning they have a way to connect in with each other as though they are one. And they all of them meet, and they call it going on the hill. And there can be 10,000 autistic people on the hill at any given point in time, all in conversation with each other, right in real time, and all of them able to understand each other. They all have an ability to access higher levels of knowing. So they're accessing what I call the first latent power, where if they need to know how to make a canoe, they go to the room, put a hat on canoe making, and they make the canoe. If they need to create um, rocket fuel, they go to the room with the hat with the rocket fuel, and the rocket fuel from 10 years from now, not the stuff that we're using today, and they put it on, and then they'll have that. And what I would like to do is have a conversation. I don't know if they would ever invite me to the hill. They don't. Just because you say, "Oh, I want to go down the hill," it's like, yeah, good luck with that. But there are people that they are inviting onto the hill, and I would have a lot of questions for them, but I also have some answers for them also, and I would like to share those with them. So we'll see what happens. After you find the telepathy tapes, you may want to look at Veda Austin, VedaAustin. She does research on water, and she now is communicating with the autistic people who have definite ideas on what water is, how you deal with water, and that water pervades the universe, including the spaces between planets. When I heard that, first thing I did was go back to my Bible, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. I remember reading that when I was like really, really young, and saying like the God put creation on the waters of the deep. Okay, where do you get the water from? Who made that? And guess what? There's not an answer for that. We're just supposed to be in awe of it, you know. So telepathy tapes are really, really important. I'm going to see if I can get you a link. No, I can't. I'm going to not try to. Um, um, just YouTube search for telepathy tapes and you'll come across them. Start with episode 1, go to at least 10 or 11. Bottom line, autistic people are telepathic and are telepathic at levels that we can't even imagine. According to the parapsychology tests, if you test out at 30%, that says that you have telepathic powers that are beyond chance. The autistic people are testing out at 95% and sometimes 100%. This is the fear that people have, I think, around AI. I have no fear whatsoever. It will never be intelligent. It can be a really good tool. We can let it become a dangerous tool. But the bottom line is the thing that we share with other living beings is much more profound than anything any AI will ever be able to do. Somebody talked about AI in terms of being a centaur. You remember centaur is half person, half horse. And as they said, if you use AI like the horse part, where you use like if you've got to do 20,000 calculations to get to a particular result, you let the AI do the 20,000 calculations. You say, yo, AI, do 20,000 calculations or 200,000 calculations, or, compare this group with that group. But in terms of letting AI drive your car, bad idea. Both as a car and as a concept of I'm not going to be in control. I want some conscious being to be in control, some living being to be in control.